Little girls love fairy tales. The magic, adventure, and promises of a happily ever after cast a warm glow over their small, innocent worlds. It's a comforting delusion, one that Kalia once held close. But fairy tales, she'd come to learn, have a way of biting back. They build expectations of kindness and justice, only to tear them apart in the cold light of reality. And for Kalia, reality was a shadow that clung to her like a second skin. Kalia grew up without a wolf, a shifter who couldn't shift. That alone was a cruel twist of fate, but it wasn't the worst of it. Her parents, once proud and protective, were gone, leaving her to navigate a world where strength and dominance determined worth. By the time she turned 18, Kalia had perfected the art of disappearing. Being unseen was easier, safer. Until one night changed everything. The gathering at the Pack Hall was meant to be celebratory, a rite of passage for those who had come of age. For Kalia, it was another evening of avoiding curious glances and whispered remarks. She'd chosen her simplest blue dress, hoping it would help her fade into the background. And it had, until he spoke. Kalia Eldrin. Her name rolled off Commander Riven's tongue like a decree. The room fell silent, the laughter and chatter evaporating like mist. Riven, the pack's alpha, stood at the center of the hall, his dark eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that made Kalia's pulse spike. He was everything an alpha should be, commanding, composed, and devastatingly magnetic. He was also the last person she expected to call her name. The crowd parted as he approached her, his steps deliberate, measured. Kalia's chest tightened as her mind raced through 1,000 possibilities. What had she done wrong? Why was he coming to her? When he stopped in front of her, the weight of his presence was suffocating. He towered over her, his broad shoulders filling her field of vision. The faint scent of cedar and musk clung to him, making her head spin. "Come with me," he said, his voice low and commanding. She hesitated, her gaze darting toward the other pack members. Their faces were masks of curiosity and suspicion. Riven's tone brooked no argument, yet Kalia's instincts screamed at her to resist. Something wasn't right. "Alpha," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Have I done something wrong?" Riven's jaw tightened, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "Just come." The room watched in stunned silence as Kalia followed him out of the hall and into the cool night. The air was crisp, carrying the faint hum of cicadas and the distant rustle of leaves. Kalia kept her head down, her heart pounding as she tried to make sense of the situation. She'd spent her life avoiding attention, and now the alpha himself was leading her away. When they stopped in a secluded clearing, Riven turned to face her. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting sharp shadows across his angular features. For a moment, he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You turned 18 today," he said finally. She nodded, unsure of what to say. Her birthday wasn't exactly a cause for celebration. It was a reminder of her failures, a milestone that marked her continued lack of a wolf. Riven took a step closer, his gaze piercing. "Do you know what that means?" Kalia shook her head. "No, Alpha." He exhaled, a sound laced with frustration. "It means the bond has awakened." Her brows knitted in confusion. "The bond." He nodded, his gaze softening for a fraction of a second before hardening again. "You're my mate, Kalia." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her mind reeled, struggling to process their meaning. The mate bond was sacred, a connection ordained by fate itself. But why her? Why would fate choose someone like her for someone like him? "That can't be," she whispered, shaking her head. "You must be mistaken." "I wish I were," he muttered, the bitterness in his tone cutting deeper than any blade. But the bond doesn't lie. He turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension. Kalia stared at his back, her emotions a storm of disbelief, fear, and something else. Something she didn't dare name. "I can't accept this," he said, his voice barely audible. "The pack needs a strong Luna, someone who can lead alongside me. Not a girl who can't even shift." The words were a dagger to her chest, sharp and merciless. Kalia felt the sting of tears but refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her throat. "If that's your decision, then I'll respect it." Riven's head snapped toward her, his eyes narrowing. "That's it. No fight. No protest." Kalia met his gaze, her own filled with quiet defiance. "You've made it clear where you stand. I won't beg for something that was never mine to begin with." For a moment, Riven looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Then his lips twisted into a bitter smile. "You're stronger than you look, Kalia Eldrin." He stepped closer, so close that she could see the faint scar above his brow and the flicker of something. Regret? Guilt. It was gone before she could be sure. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. And then he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the moonlit clearing. Kalia watched him go, her heart a tangled mess of pain and confusion. She'd always been an outsider, a ghost in her own pack. Now, she was cursed to be something worse, a rejected mate. But as she stood there, the weight of his words settled over her. The bond had awakened. Fate had chosen her, for better or worse. And if Riven thought he could simply walk away, he was wrong. Fate had a way of defying even the strongest wills. And Kalia wasn't ready to let hers be written without a fight. The weight of rejection pressed on Kalia like an invisible shroud. She'd held her composure in the clearing, but the moment she stepped inside her small room at the Pax Lodge, her walls crumbled. The moonlight streamed through the lone window, casting pale streaks across the floor, as though mocking her emptiness. Her fists clenched at her sides, nails biting into her palms as she tried to ground herself. Riven had chosen to sever the bond she hadn't even had time to understand. She sank to her knees, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. For years, she'd felt invisible to her pack, an afterthought. Without a wolf, she wasn't considered one of them, not truly. But this was different. The bond's faint hum, now severed, left her feeling raw and hollow, as if a piece of her soul had been torn away. A sharp knock on her door pulled her from the spiral of her thoughts. She hastily wiped her tears, rising to her feet. "Come in," she called, forcing her voice into a semblance of steadiness. The door creaked open, revealing Vera, the pack's healer. Her kind eyes scanned Kalia's face, taking in her tear-streaked cheeks and trembling hands. Vera stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. "I thought I might find you here," she said, her tone warm but edged with concern. Kalia looked away, ashamed of her vulnerability. "I'm fine," she murmured. "No, you're not." Vera's voice was firm, but not unkind. She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Kalia's arm. "Sit with me. Let's talk." Reluctantly, Kalia allowed herself to be guided to the edge of her bed. She stared at her hands as Vera settled beside her. "I know what happened," Vera began. "Word travels fast in a pack." Kalia winced. Of course, everyone would know by now. The humiliation stung worse than Riven's rejection. "You're not alone, you know," Vera said softly. "Rejection is a wound, and like all wounds, it needs time to heal." Kalia shook her head. "It's not just the rejection. It's everything. The bond, the pack, Riven, she trailed off, her voice cracking. I don't even know why fate would tie me to him in the first place. I'm nothing to this pack. Vera's grip on her arm tightened slightly. Don't ever say that. You may not have a wolf, but you have a spirit stronger than most. The pack doesn't see it because they're blinded by their own expectations. But I see it. Riven saw it too, even if he won't admit it. Collier's head snapped up, her brow furrowed. He made it perfectly clear that he doesn't want me. That doesn't mean he didn't feel the bond, Vera replied. Rejection isn't easy for either side. Even an alpha feels its sting. The words were meant to comfort, but they only fueled Collier's confusion. Why reject her if the bond was as strong as everyone claimed? Why walk away without even giving it a chance? Before she could voice her thoughts, a low howl echoed through the night, faint but unmistakable. Collier froze, her heart lurching. The patrols, Vera murmured, her expression darkening. Something's wrong. The howl was followed by another, louder and more urgent. Collier stood abruptly, her pulse quickening. What is it? I don't know, Vera admitted, rising to her feet. But stay here. I'll find out. Collier's instincts screamed against the idea of staying behind. She was no warrior, but she couldn't sit idly by while something threatened her pack. Ignoring Vera's warning, she grabbed a jacket and followed her out the door. The pack's main square was in chaos. Wolves in various stages of shifting darted through the shadows, their growls and snarls blending into a cacophony of sound. The air was thick with tension, a palpable sense of dread hanging over the scene. Collier's gaze swept the crowd, searching for any sign of Riven. He was nowhere to be seen. Collier, what are you doing here? Vera's voice was sharp as she appeared at her side. I told you to stay in your room. I couldn't, Collier said, her voice trembling. What's happening? Before Vera could answer, a deep, guttural roar cut through the night. The crowd stilled, every head turning toward the source of the sound. Emerging from the tree lean was a massive figure, its white fur glowing eerily in the moonlight. Collier's breath hitched. It wasn't a normal wolf. It was larger, its eyes glowing an unnatural red. The creature exuded raw power and menace, its gaze sweeping over the gathered pack with predatory intent. What is that? Collier whispered, her voice barely audible. A rogue, Vera said grimly. But not just any rogue. There's something off about it. The rogue's gaze landed on Collier, and for a moment she felt as though she were being pulled into its depths. A shiver ran down her spine as a strange sensation washed over her. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was something darker, more primal. Get back, Vera hissed, pushing Collier behind her. Stay out of sight. The rogue let out another roar, its muscles coiling as it prepared to charge. The pack sprang into action, forming a defensive line between the creature and the rest of the wolves. But even as they prepared for battle, a sense of unease rippled through the crowd. The rogue wasn't just powerful. It was familiar. Collier's heart raced as she watched the scene unfold. The rogue lunged, its movements impossibly fast for a creature of its size. The pack's warriors met it head-on, their snarls and growls filling the air. But despite their numbers, the rogue held its ground, fighting with a ferocity that bordered on madness. Collier's gaze remained locked on the rogue, her mind racing. There was something about its movements, its scent, that tugged at the edges of her memory. And then, like a flash of lightning, it hit her. The rogue's eyes. They were the same dark, piercing eyes she'd stared into earlier that night. The same eyes that had looked at her with regret and bitterness. It wasn't just any rogue. It was Riven. Kolia's breath caught in her throat as the realization crashed over her. The alpha who had rejected her, who had walked away without a second glance, was now a beast driven by something far beyond his control. And as the pack fought to subdue him, she knew one thing with terrifying certainty. Riven wasn't the only one in danger. The entire pack was at risk, and it was up to her to uncover the truth before it was too late. The rogue's guttural roars echoed in Kolia's ears long after the chaos had moved further into the pack's territory. Despite Vera's protests, she stayed on the edge of the battle, her chest heaving and mind swirling with the terrible truth. Riven wasn't just any rogue, he was the rogue. Her alpha. Her mate. Rejected and cursed. The pack had managed to drive him deeper into the forest, but it wasn't a victory. Not really. Kolia had seen the raw fury in his eyes, the way he fought with a primal, almost desperate energy. That wasn't the Riven she knew. Or rather, the Riven she thought she knew. Kolia. Vera's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, sharp with worry. What are you still doing here? You need to get inside. Kolia turned, but her feet refused to move. He's not just a rogue, she whispered, her voice trembling. It's him, Vera. It's Riven. Vera froze, her eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? I'm telling you, it's him. The eyes, the scent, everything. Kolia's words faltered as a new wave of shouts erupted from deeper within the forest. Her breath hitched. Something's happened. The healer hesitated, torn between her duty to the injured and the young woman in front of her. If what you're saying is true, then you need to stay out of this. Let the pack handle it. But Kolia's resolve hardened. No. I have to find him. Before Vera could stop her, Kolia darted into the trees, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't have a wolf, didn't have heightened senses or supernatural strength, but she had something else. A connection. It was faint, like a flickering ember buried under ash, but it was there. And it would lead her to him. The forest was eerily quiet, save for the crunch of leaves beneath Kolia's boots and the distant echoes of the pack's search party. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, tinged faintly with blood. Her fingers brushed the rough bark of a tree as she paused to catch her breath, her ears straining for any sign of movement. She found it in the form of a low growl. Her pulse quickened as she turned toward the sound, her eyes scanning the shadows. Riven, she called softly, her voice trembling. A rustle of leaves was her only answer. Then, slowly, a massive shape emerged from the underbrush. The white-furred rogue stood before her, its red eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. It was a terrifying sight, yet Kolia didn't move. Couldn't move. Riven, she whispered again, this time with more certainty. It's me. Kolia. The wolf growled, its muscles tense as it regarded her with a mix of wariness and aggression. But there was something else in its gaze. Something human. A flicker of recognition. You know me, she said, taking a cautious step forward. Her voice softened, steady despite the pounding of her heart. I know you do. You're not just the beast. You're still in there. The growl deepened, and for a moment, Kolia thought he might attack. But then the wolf hesitated, its massive frame shifting slightly as if caught between instincts. She seized the moment. I know you didn't want this, she said, her voice cracking. I don't know what happened to you, but I'm going to help you. I promise. The wolf let out a sharp bark, and Kolia froze. It wasn't an attack, but a warning. The message was clear. Stay back. But she couldn't. Not now. The sound of approaching footsteps shattered the fragile tension. Kolia turned to see several pack warriors emerging through the trees, their faces grim and determined. They'd found him. Get out of the way, Kolia, one of them shouted, a spear gleaming in his hands. That's not your fight. It is my fight, she shot back, positioning herself between them and the rogue. You can't kill him. The warrior hesitated, his eyes narrowing. He's a danger to the pack. You've seen what he's done. You don't understand. He's cursed. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. This isn't his fault. A murmur rippled through the group, confusion and disbelief written across their faces. Cursed, one of them echoed. What are you talking about? Kalia took a shaky breath. Something happened to him. I don't know what or how, but he's not just a rogue. He's Riven. Our alpha. The pack's reaction was immediate. Some gasped in shock, others growled in disbelief. But the warrior with the spear, their leader, shook his head. I don't know what you're trying to pull, but that thing is no alpha, he said coldly. Stand aside. No. Kalia's voice rang out, stronger than she felt. I won't let you hurt him. The rogue growled behind her, a low, rumbling sound that sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't directed at her, but at the pack. He was protecting her, she realized. Even now, in this state, he recognized her enough to shield her. The warrior raised his spear. Move, or I'll make you. The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, before anyone could react, the rogue lunged. Kalia barely had time to scream as the rogue's massive form collided with the warrior, sending him crashing into the underbrush. The other pack members sprang into action, their growls filling the air as they charged. But Kalia's focus remained on the rogue, on Riven. He wasn't fighting to kill. He was fighting to protect. And in that moment, Kalia knew she had to act before it was too late. The forest erupted into chaos as the pack warriors lunged toward the rogue, their snarls and growls blending into a cacophony of sound. Kalia's heart pounded as she watched Riven, massive, feral and desperate, fend them off with raw, brutal strength. Each swipe of his claws sent warriors sprawling, but he never went for the kill. His movements were defensive, calculated. He wasn't attacking. He was surviving. Stop! Kalia screamed, her voice breaking through the noise. He's not your enemy. The warriors hesitated, their instincts warring with their loyalty. Riven used the opening to leap backward, creating distance between himself and the pack. His glowing red eyes locked onto Kalia, a flicker of something human flashing through them before the beast reasserted itself. Don't let him escape, the lead warrior barked, raising his spear. But Kalia stepped into his path, her arms outstretched. Enough, she cried. Can't you see he's trying to protect me? The warrior's jaw tightened, his grip on the spear unwavering. He's dangerous, Kalia. You're too close to see it. I'm the only one who can see it, she countered. Look at him. Really look. He's not fighting to kill. He's still in there. The warrior hesitated, glancing toward Riven, who stood motionless now, his eyes flicking between Kalia and the pack. His heavy breaths fogged the cool night air, his stance tense but not aggressive. Slowly, the pack lowered their weapons, confusion and unease rippling through them. Thank you, Kalia whispered, relief flooding her. She turned back to Riven, her voice softening. Riven, it's me. I need you to come back. Please. For a moment, the rogue didn't move. Then, with a low growl, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, his massive frame vanishing as swiftly as it had appeared. No! Kalia's cry tore from her throat. She made to follow, but the lead warrior grabbed her arm, holding her back. Let him go, he said. We need to regroup. This isn't over. Back at the pack lodge, the atmosphere was tense. Kalia sat at the edge of the council chamber, her hands clenched into fists. The warriors debated furiously, their voices rising as they argued over the rogue's fate. "He's a threat to all of us," one growled. "If we don't take him down now, who knows what he'll do?" "He's not a threat," Kalia snapped, her voice cutting through the din. "He's cursed. If we can break it." "How?" another warrior interrupted. "You don't even know what caused it." Kalia hesitated, the truth weighing heavily on her. She didn't know the specifics, but she was certain of one thing. The rogue wasn't acting of his own will. Riven was trapped, and if they didn't act quickly, he would be lost forever. "I'll find a way," she said, her voice firm. "But you have to give me time." The warriors exchanged skeptical glances. Finally, the lead warrior, Ronan, spoke. "You have until dawn. If you can't prove there's a way to save him, we'll do what needs to be done." Kalia nodded, her stomach twisting with dread. It wasn't much, but it was all the time she needed. She found Vera in the healer's quarters, sorting through vials of herbs and ointments. The older woman looked up as Kalia entered, her expression guarded. "You're going to tell me I'm crazy," Kalia began, "but I need your help." Vera sighed, setting down a vial. "I'm listening." Kalia hesitated, then blurted out everything she knew. The rogue's identity, the curse, the fleeting glimpses of humanity in his eyes. Vera listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When Kalia finished, Vera crossed her arms. "You're not crazy," she said, "but you're not thinking this through. If he's cursed, then the answer lies in who cursed him, and why." "I know," Kalia said, "but I don't know where to start." Vera's gaze softened. "There's someone who might. But you're not going to like it." The moon hung high in the sky as Kalia stood before the entrance to the old witch's den. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, and the faint sound of running water echoed in the distance. Kalia hesitated, her fingers brushing the pendant around her neck, a small trinket she'd kept from her parents. It gave her courage, however fleeting. "Are you sure about this?" Vera's voice was cautious, laced with concern. "No," Kalia admitted, "but I don't have a choice." Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the wooden door. The interior was dimly lit, the flickering glow of candles casting eerie shadows on the walls. Shelves lined with jars of strange substances and old books gave the place an otherworldly feel. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in black, her eyes sharp and knowing. The witch, Erin, regarded Kalia with a faint smile. "You're bold to come here," she said, her voice smooth and honeyed. "What do you seek?" Kalia's throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak. "I need to know about a curse. A wolf, an alpha, has been transformed. I think someone wished for it." Erin's smile widened, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "Ah, the magician's work. He does have a flair for the dramatic, doesn't he?" Kalia's heart skipped a beat. "You know about him?" "Of course," Erin said, stepping closer. "But tell me, child, why do you care so much about this alpha? Is it loyalty? Or something deeper?" The question struck a nerve, but Kalia stood her ground. "I just need to know how to help him." Erin tilted her head, studying her. "There is a way. But it comes at a cost." "What cost?" Kalia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The witch's smile faded, her gaze turning cold. "The same as all magic. You'll have to give up what you hold most dear." Kalia's breath caught as Erin's words sank in. What did she hold most dear? Her life. Her sister. Her humanity. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. But as the witch stepped back into the shadows, her voice echoed through the room like a chilling promise. Decide quickly, little wolf. Time is running out. The witch's den seemed heavier now, suffocatingly so, as Kalia stared into the void where Erin had disappeared moments ago. The question hung in her mind like a blade poised to strike. What do I hold most dear? Kalia clenched her fists, forcing herself to steady her breathing. She wasn't just doing this for herself. This was about Riven, her pack, and perhaps even more than that, the chance to prove she was more than a wolf-less outcast. The faint sound of Erin's footsteps brought her attention back. The witch reappeared, her slender fingers clutching a small vial filled with a shimmering, silver liquid. She held it up, the glow casting strange, dancing reflections across her sharp features. This, Erin said, her voice like a purr, will break the curse. But it comes at a steep price. Kalia swallowed hard, her throat dry. What do you mean? Erin approached slowly, her gaze boring into Kalia's with unnerving intensity. Magic this potent doesn't come without balance. To undo what was done, you must give me what you value most. Kalia stiffened. But, how will you know what that is? Erin chuckled, a sound that sent a chill down Kalia's spine. The magic will know. It always does. For a moment, Kalia felt paralyzed, torn between fear and resolve. She thought of Riven's glowing red eyes, the way he had looked at her in the forest, a mix of rage and desperation. She thought of the pack, of the warriors who saw her as nothing more than a liability. And then she thought of herself, the girl who had lived in the shadows, yearning to be seen. I'll do it, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. I'll pay the price. Erin's smile returned, sly and knowing. How noble of you. The witch handed Kalia the vial, her movements deliberate. Pour this over him when the moon is at its highest. The curse will break, but be prepared. The magic will claim its price. The journey back to the pack felt like a blur. Kalia's mind raced, her thoughts a storm of uncertainty. What could the magic take from her? Her memories? Her connection to Riven? Or something even more tangible? Her sister Vera, or the fragile sense of belonging she had clung to her whole life? The forest loomed dark and quiet around her, the usual sounds of the night subdued, as if the world itself held its breath. The weight of the vial in her pocket felt almost unbearable, a constant reminder of what was to come. As she neared the pack lodge, the distant sound of raised voices broke the stillness. She quickened her pace, her pulse pounding in her ears. When she reached the clearing, she saw the pack gathered in a tense circle. At the center stood Ronan, his posture rigid with authority. We've given her enough time, he was saying, his voice cold and resolute. If Kalia can't produce a solution, we'll deal with the rogue ourselves. You'll do no such thing. Kalia's voice rang out, clear and commanding, silencing the murmurs around her. She stepped into the circle, holding her head high despite the unease gnawing at her. Ronan's gaze snapped to her, his eyes narrowing. You have an answer, then? Kalia pulled the vial from her pocket, holding it up for all to see. This will break the curse. But I'll need your trust, and your patience. The crowd erupted into a flurry of whispers and growls, skepticism rippling through them like a wave. Ronan's eyes flicked to the vial, then back to Kalia. And what guarantees do we have that this isn't some trick? That it will actually work? There are no guarantees, Kalia admitted. But if we don't try, we lose him, and possibly more. He's our alpha. If there's a chance to save him, we have to take it. Ronan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The silence stretched, thick and oppressive, until finally he nodded. You have until midnight. The moon hung high in the sky, its light spilling over the forest in a pale, ghostly glow. Kalia stood at the edge of the clearing where she had last seen Riven, her heart pounding as she scanned the shadows. The vial felt like lead in her hand, its contents swirling faintly in the moonlight. A rustle of leaves behind her sent her spinning, her breath catching in her throat. She turned to see Riven emerging from the trees, his massive form cutting a stark figure against the darkness. His glowing red eyes locked onto hers, a low growl rumbling from deep within his chest. "Riven," she said softly, her voice trembling. "It's me." The rogue took a step closer, his movements slow and deliberate. Kalia's heart raced, but she forced herself to stand her ground. She raised the vial, the faint shimmer catching his attention. "This will help you," she said. "Please, let me help you." For a moment, it seemed as though he understood. The tension in his posture eased slightly, his growl subsiding into soft, ragged breaths. But then, something shifted. His red eyes flared brighter, and he let out a deafening roar, charging toward her with terrifying speed. Kalia barely had time to react. She dropped to the ground, rolling out of the way as his massive claws tore through the air where she had been standing. Her heart pounded as she scrambled to her feet, clutching the vial tightly. "Riven, stop," she cried, desperation lacing her voice. "This isn't you." But the rogue didn't stop. He circled her, his growls deep and menacing, the beast in him fully in control. Kalia's mind raced, her grip on the vial tightening. She needed to get close enough to use it. But how? He was faster, stronger, and driven by instincts she couldn't hope to match. And then, an idea struck her. Slowly, she lowered herself to the ground, bowing her head and baring her neck in a gesture of submission. "I'm not your enemy," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "I'm your mate." The rogue stilled, his growls fading into silence. Kalia's heart thundered in her chest as he approached, his red eyes narrowing as he studied her. She held her breath, waiting, praying. When he was close enough, she moved. In one swift motion, she uncorked the vial and flung its contents over him. The silver liquid shimmered as it hit his fur, spreading like wildfire. Riven let out a guttural roar, his body convulsing as the magic took hold. Kalia stumbled backward, her eyes wide as the rogue's form began to change. His fur receded, his massive frame shrinking as his human features re-emerged. The red glow in his eyes dimmed, replaced by the familiar dark gaze she had known before. "Riven," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. He looked up at her, his expression a mix of confusion and pain. "Kalia." Before Kalia could respond, a searing pain tore through her chest. She gasped, clutching at her heart as the magic claimed its price. Her vision blurred, and the last thing she saw before darkness consumed her was Riven's horrified face. Darkness surrounded Kalia like a suffocating blanket. Her chest burned, the sensation sharp and unrelenting, as if her very soul were being pried open. Whispers swirled around her, faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to echo from another world. "Kalia." The voice was soft, almost familiar, but she couldn't place it. It tugged at her consciousness, drawing her toward the surface of her mind. Slowly, the darkness began to lift, and she felt the cold, damp earth beneath her fingers. "Kalia." Riven's voice cut through the haze, panic evident in his tone. She opened her eyes to find his face hovering above hers, his dark eyes wide with concern. The red glow was gone, replaced by a clarity she hadn't seen in him for weeks. "Riven," her voice was a whisper, her throat raw. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm, as if to confirm he was really there. "You're alive," he said, his voice shaking. You scared the hell out of me. She tried to sit up, but her body protested with a wave of pain that made her gasp. Riven's hands were on her shoulders immediately, steadying her. Easy, he said. You need to rest. Kalia shook her head, ignoring the sharp ache that radiated through her skull. The magic. What did it do? Riven's jaw tightened. He glanced away, his expression darkening. You collapsed. It was like something was being taken from you. I tried to wake you, but you were unresponsive. What about you? She asked, her voice trembling. Are you back? He nodded, though his eyes remained shadowed. I'm here. The curse, it's gone. Relief flooded through her, but it was short-lived. The memory of Erin's warning resurfaced in her mind, and dread settled in its place. The magic will claim its price. What did it take from me? She whispered, more to herself than to Riven. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he helped her to her feet, his movements careful. We should get back to the pack. They need to know you succeeded. The walk back to the pack lodge was silent, save for the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. Kalia's thoughts raced, her body heavy with exhaustion. She felt different, though she couldn't quite place how. Her heart ached, not physically, but in a way that felt deeply personal, as if a vital piece of her had been carved away. When they emerged from the forest, the pack was waiting. A chorus of gasps rippled through the crowd as they caught sight of Riven, his human form intact. The tension in the air dissipated, replaced by relief and awe. Alpha, Ronan said, stepping forward. His tone was hesitant, his usual confidence subdued. You're back. Riven nodded, his expression unreadable. Thanks to Kalia. All eyes turned to her, and for the first time, the weight of their scrutiny didn't crush her. She stood taller, meeting their gazes head-on. But even as the pack murmured their gratitude, she couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness growing inside her. Later, in the quiet of the lodge, Kalia sat alone by the fire. The warmth of the flames did little to chase away the chill that had settled in her bones. Riven had insisted she rest, but her mind wouldn't let her. Something was wrong. Something was missing. You look troubled, Vera's voice broke through her thoughts. Kalia turned to see the healer entering the room, her kind eyes filled with concern. She offered a weak smile. I'm fine. Vera didn't look convinced. She sat beside Kalia, her gaze searching. You've been through a lot. It's natural to feel unsettled. It's more than that, Kalia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I feel hollow, like a part of me is gone. Vera's brow furrowed. The magic. Kalia nodded, clutching her arms to her chest. Erin said it would take what I valued most. But I don't know what that is. Sometimes, Vera said gently, we don't realize what we hold dear until it's gone. Kalia's heart sank at the words. What could she have lost without even realizing it? Her mind darted to her memories, her bond with Riven, her connection to the pack. Everything seemed intact, yet the void within her said otherwise. As the days passed, Kalia couldn't shake the nagging sensation that something vital had been stripped away. She went about her duties, assisting the pack and working alongside Riven as he re-established his role as Alpha. Yet the bond between them felt strained. It wasn't until a quiet evening in the woods that Kalia confronted him. Do you feel it? She asked, her voice breaking the stillness. Riven turned to her, his brow furrowed. Feel what? This distance, she said, gesturing between them. The bond, it's not the same. He hesitated, his expression conflicted. I thought it was just me. Kalia's chest tightened. What if that's what the magic took? Our bond. Riven's silence was answer enough. The thought hit her like a physical blow. The bond that had been forced upon them by fate, the one she had come to accept, even cherish, was now a mere shadow of what it had been. I didn't want to believe it, Riven said finally, his voice low. But you're right. It feels weaker. Collier's throat tightened. What does that mean for us? Riven looked away, his jaw clenching. I don't know. Collier stared at Riven, her heart aching with the weight of his words. The bond, the very thing that had brought them together, was slipping away. And as she stood there in the quiet of the woods, one thought consumed her. If the bond was gone, what else did she have to lose? The days following Collier and Riven's conversation were a blur of unease and unanswered questions. The pack had returned to a fragile sense of normalcy, but the cracks beneath the surface were undeniable. Collier tried to immerse herself in her duties, but the emptiness gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the price she had paid. Collier stood at the edge of the training grounds, watching as the younger pack members practiced their shifting. The air was filled with laughter and the sharp crack of snapping twigs as wolves darted between trees. For a moment, she envied their simplicity, their ability to focus on the moment without the weight of the past dragging them down. Why are you out here? Ronan's voice startled her, and she turned to find him approaching with his usual swagger. His sharp green eyes studied her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Just watching, she replied, crossing her arms. Ronan tilted his head, his smirk fading. You've been off lately. Everyone's noticed. I'm fine, Collier said, her voice clipped. Sure you are, he said, unconvinced. You're quiet, distracted. Even Riven's noticed, and he's not exactly the poster child for emotional awareness. At the mention of Riven, her chest tightened. She turned away, hoping Ronan wouldn't press further. But Ronan wasn't one to back down easily. Does this have to do with what happened in the woods? He asked, stepping closer. Collier's jaw clenched. You wouldn't understand. Try me, he said, leaning against a tree with an easy confidence that grated on her nerves. She hesitated, torn between brushing him off and unloading the weight that had been pressing on her. Finally, she sighed. The bond between Riven and me. It's different now. We're different. Ronan raised an eyebrow. Different how? It's fading, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The connection we had, it's not the same. For a moment, Ronan said nothing. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. Bonds aren't unbreakable, you know. Even fate can be rewritten. Collier frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying, Ronan replied, his tone serious for once, that if you want to fix this, you'll have to fight for it. Magic may have taken something from you, but that doesn't mean it's gone forever. Collier stared at him, his words igniting a small spark of hope within her. But before she could respond, a low growl echoed from the tree-line. The growl sent a ripple of tension through the training grounds. The younger wolves froze, their laughter replaced by uneasy murmurs. Collier's heart raced as she scanned the shadows, searching for the source. Emerging from the trees was a wolf unlike any she had seen before. Its fur was a mottled grey, its eyes a sickly yellow that glowed unnaturally. The wolf's movements were jerky, almost unnatural, as though it were being controlled by an unseen force. What the hell is that? Ronan muttered, stepping in front of Collier. The other wolves began to shift, their growls rising in unison as they prepared to defend their territory. But the rogue wolf didn't attack. Instead, it stood at the edge of the clearing, its gaze locked on Collier. It's here for me, she whispered, her voice trembling. Ronan shot her a sharp look. What are you talking about? I don't know, she admitted, her hands clenching into fists. But I can feel it. Before Ronan could respond, the rogue let out a bone-chilling howl. The sound reverberated through the air, sending a shiver down Kalia's spine. And then, without warning, it turned and disappeared into the forest. Stay here, Ronan said, his tone firm. I'm going after it. No. Kalia grabbed his arm, her grip tight. It's not safe. Ronan smirked, though there was no humor in his expression. When is it ever? Before she could argue further, he shifted and bolted into the woods, his powerful form disappearing into the shadows. The other wolves hesitated, torn between following and staying to protect Kalia. She felt helpless, torn between fear and the urge to act. The rogue's gaze had lingered on her, its unspoken message clear. Follow me. Minutes felt like hours as Kalia paced at the edge of the clearing. The forest was eerily silent, the usual sounds of wildlife absent. Every rustle of leaves set her on edge, her heart pounding in her chest. When Ronan finally reappeared, he was in his human form, his expression grim. He was out of breath, scratches marring his arms and chest. What happened? Kalia demanded, rushing to his side. It's gone, he said, his voice tight. But it wasn't running away. It was leading me somewhere. Where? She asked, dread creeping into her voice. Ronan hesitated, his gaze flicking to the forest before meeting hers. There's a clearing about a mile from here. It's wrong, Kalia. The air felt heavy, like the magic we felt when Riven was cursed. Kalia's blood ran cold. You think it's connected? I don't know, he admitted. But whatever that wolf is, it's tied to the magic that's been haunting this pack. That night, Kalia couldn't sleep. The rogue wolf's image burned in her mind, its sickly yellow eyes watching her as if it knew her secrets. She sat by the fire, her knees drawn to her chest, as the shadows in the room seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. A knock at the door startled her, and she rose to find Riven on the other side. His expression was weary, his shoulders slumped as though the weight of the world rested on them. We need to talk, he said. Kalia stepped aside, letting him in. He hesitated by the fire, his gaze distant. I heard about the rogue, he began. And the clearing. It's tied to the curse, isn't it? She asked. He nodded. I think so. Whatever magic took our bond, it's not finished with us. Kalia swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over her. What do we do? Riven met her gaze, his dark eyes filled with determination. We find the source. And we end this. As Kalia stared into the fire, Riven's words echoed in her mind. The rogue wolf's gaze, the cursed clearing, the lingering magic. They were all pieces of a puzzle she didn't understand. But one thing was clear. The fight wasn't over. And as the fire crackled and shadows danced around them, she couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was yet to come. The following morning, Kalia awoke to the muted light of dawn filtering through her window. Her heart was heavy with the weight of Riven's words. We find the source. And we end this. It had been a declaration filled with conviction, but the fear gnawing at her insides told her that the path ahead would be fraught with danger. The pack gathered in the lodge's main hall as Riven addressed them. His presence commanded attention, even in the shadow of his curse. His voice, steady and commanding, echoed through the room. We've identified a location that could hold answers to the rogue attacks and the magic affecting this pack, he began, his sharp gaze sweeping over the crowd. It's a clearing deep in the northern woods. We believe it's tied to the curse. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, unease evident in their faces. Kalia stood near the back, watching the exchange with a mix of trepidation and determination. What do you want us to do, Alpha? one of the senior warriors asked. I'm leading a small team to investigate, Riven replied. We can't risk the entire pack. It's dangerous, and we don't know what we're dealing with. Kalia's heart raced. She knew she had to be part of that team. But as she opened her mouth to volunteer, Riven's gaze locked onto her. You're not coming, he said firmly, as if reading her mind. She stiffened. You can't decide that for me. I can and I have, he countered, his tone brooking no argument. It's too dangerous. Kalia's frustration boiled over. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs. You think I'm just going to sit here while you walk into the heart of this curse? You need me. Riven's jaw tightened. This isn't a discussion. Kalia squared her shoulders. It never is with you, is it? You're so focused on protecting the pack that you forget I'm part of it too. This affects me just as much as it does you. The room fell silent as the tension between them crackled like a live wire. Finally, Riven sighed, his expression softening ever so slightly. Fine. But stay close to me. The team set out at midday, the forest around them thick with shadows. Riven led the way, his movements deliberate and his senses sharp. Kalia followed closely, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. Ronan, Vera, and 2 warriors rounded out the group, their silence a testament to the gravity of their mission. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew heavy, the air thick with an unnatural energy. The usual sounds of the forest, birdsong, rustling leaves, were conspicuously absent, replaced by an oppressive silence. Does anyone else feel that? Ronan muttered, his voice low. Kalia nodded, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. It's like the air's alive. It's the magic, Vera said, her tone grim. It's getting stronger. The group pressed on, the tension mounting with every step. The trees seemed to close in around them, their gnarled branches twisting into grotesque shapes. Kalia's grip on her blade tightened as unease settled in her chest. When they finally reached the clearing, it was as though they'd stepped into another world. The grass was blackened and brittle, the earth cracked and lifeless. In the center of the clearing stood a twisted tree, its bark scarred with strange glowing symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly light. What is this place? Ronan breathed, his eyes wide. It's a focus point, Vera said, her voice barely above a whisper. A nexus of magic. Riven approached the tree cautiously, his movements deliberate. The closer he got, the more the air seemed to hum with energy. Kalia followed, her eyes drawn to the symbols etched into the bark. They seemed to shift and writhe as she looked at them, as if alive. This is it, Riven said, his voice steady. This is where the curse began. As Riven examined the tree, Kalia's gaze wandered to the edges of the clearing. Something about the shadows seemed off. They moved unnaturally, curling and twisting like living things. Her breath hitched as a pair of glowing yellow eyes appeared in the darkness. Riven, she whispered, her voice tight with fear. We're not alone. The group tensed, their eyes darting to the tree-line. Slowly, figures began to emerge from the shadows. Rogues, more than they'd ever seen before. Their eyes glowed with the same unnatural yellow as the wolf from the training grounds, their movements erratic and predatory. They were waiting for us, Ronan growled, shifting into his wolf form. Riven stepped in front of Kalia, his stance protective. Stay behind me. Kalia ignored him, her instincts screaming for her to act. She gripped her blade tightly, her eyes scanning the encroaching wolves. We have to do something. Riven didn't respond. Instead, he let out a low growl, his body tense as he prepared to shift. The rogues snarled in response, their growls echoing through the clearing like a sinister chorus. The first rogue lunged, and chaos erupted. The battle was fierce and chaotic, the air filled with snarls and the clash of bodies. Kalia fought with everything she had, her blade flashing as she defended herself against the rogues. But for every wolf they struck down, another seemed to take its place. Riven was a force of nature, his wolf form tearing through the rogues with ruthless efficiency. But even he couldn't hold them all back. Kalia. Vera's voice cut through the chaos, drawing her attention. Kalia turned just in time to see a rogue barreling toward her. She raised her blade, but the wolf was too fast. It knocked her to the ground, its jaws snapping dangerously close to her face. Before it could land a fatal blow, Riven slammed into it, sending it sprawling. He growled, his red-tinged eyes locking on to Kalia. "Stay down," he snarled, his voice guttural and barely human. But Kalia couldn't stay down. She couldn't let fear paralyze her. As the rogues closed in, she rose to her feet, her blade steady despite the tremor in her hands. The battle reached a fever pitch, the pack struggling to hold their ground against the overwhelming numbers. But as Kalia fought, she felt a strange pull, a whisper at the edge of her mind, drawing her toward the tree. She turned, her gaze locking onto the glowing symbols. They seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, their light growing brighter as if calling to her. "Kalia, don't." Riven's voice was distant, lost in the chaos. But it was too late. She stepped forward, her hand reaching out toward the tree, compelled by a force she couldn't understand. The moment her fingers brushed the bark, a surge of energy shot through her, and the world around her disappeared. Kalia's entire body trembled as the surge of energy coursed through her. The world around her dissolved into an endless void of light and sound, like a storm raging inside her mind. Her ears rang with the echoes of distant voices, too faint to comprehend but heavy with emotion, anguish, rage, desperation. She gasped, her vision swimming with a kaleidoscope of images. The clearing, the rogues, Riven, they were gone. In their place, she found herself standing in a place both alien and eerily familiar. The ground beneath her feet was soft and mossy, the air thick with the scent of pine and something darker, like burning wood. Before her stood the twisted tree from the clearing, but here it was whole, its bark unmarred and its branches reaching skyward like claws scraping the heavens. The glowing symbols were gone, replaced by intricate carvings that seemed to depict a story, one of love, betrayal, and ruin. A voice broke through the haze, low and melodic, carrying a weight that made her heart ache. "You've come far, child, but do you understand what you've stepped into?" Kalia spun around, her breath catching in her throat. Standing before her was a woman cloaked in shadows, her face obscured save for piercing green eyes that seemed to see through her very soul. "Who are you?" Kalia demanded, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. The woman stepped closer, her movements fluid and otherworldly. "I am the keeper of this place," she said. "And you, Kalia, are a key I did not anticipate." "A key," Kalia repeated, her brow furrowing. "I don't understand." "You will," the woman replied, her gaze shifting to the tree. "This tree, it is more than a nexus of magic. It is a beacon, a tether between worlds. And it is corrupted." Kalia's eyes widened as she stared at the tree. Corrupted by what? The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. By those who sought power they were never meant to wield. The curse that plagues your pack, that twists your alpha, it all stems from here. This tree has been poisoned, and so too has everything connected to it. Kalia took a step forward, her fists clenching. "How do I stop it?" The woman's gaze softened, and for a moment, she looked almost sorrowful. "Stopping it will not be easy, child. The corruption runs deep, and it is tied to the very essence of your pack. You will face resistance, from the rogues, from your packmates, and perhaps even from yourself. Kalia shook her head, determination hardening her features. I don't care how hard it is. I'll do whatever it takes to save my pack. To save Riven. At the mention of his name, the woman's expression shifted, her eyes narrowing. Your bond with him. It is both your strength and your greatest vulnerability. The bond is a thread that ties you to the curse. If you are to undo it, you must sever that thread. Kalia's heart sank. You're saying I have to give him up? The woman nodded. A bond forged by fate cannot be undone lightly. To save him, you must release him. Before Kalia could respond, the ground beneath her feet trembled violently, the moss splitting to reveal cracks of glowing red light. The tree groaned, its branches twisting as though in pain. The air grew heavy, suffocating, and the voices that had been distant whispers rose to a deafening roar. Kalia. Riven's voice pierced through the chaos, pulling her back to reality. Kalia's eyes snapped open, and she found herself lying on the cracked earth of the clearing. The battle raged around her, the pack's warriors locked in a desperate struggle against the rogues. Riven stood over her, his wolf form battered but unyielding as he fended off an attacker. Kalia, get up, he growled, his voice strained with effort. She pushed herself to her feet, her head pounding. The symbols on the tree glowed brighter than ever, their light pulsing in time with her racing heartbeat. She could feel the pull again, stronger this time, like an invisible hand tugging her toward the tree. Kalia, don't touch it again, Riven shouted, his tone laced with desperation. But she couldn't stop herself. The woman's words echoed in her mind. You must sever the thread. She reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the bark. This time, the energy was different. Not a violent surge, but a steady pulse, like a heartbeat. She felt a connection, a thread of magic that tied her to the tree, to the curse, and to Riven. As the energy flowed through her, visions flooded her mind, moments from the past, fragmented and disjointed. She saw Riven as a child, training under his father's watchful eye. She saw the first rogue attack on the pack, the chaos and bloodshed that followed. And then she saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure, cloaked in darkness, standing before the tree. They spoke in a language she didn't understand, their voices sharp and commanding. The tree shuddered, its branches curling inward as though recoiling from the figure's presence. And then, with a flash of light, the symbols appeared, glowing with an eerie intensity. Kalia's breath hitched as the vision shifted. She saw herself, standing in the clearing, her hand on the tree. The figure's voice echoed in her mind, chilling and ominous. You are the key. The vision faded, and Kalia staggered back, her chest heaving. The battle around her seemed distant, the sounds muffled as she processed what she'd seen. Kalia. Riven's voice snapped her back to reality. He was by her side now, his human form bloodied but resolute. What did you see? It's the tree, she said, her voice trembling. It's connected to the curse, to you, to everything. I saw someone who did this. Riven's jaw tightened. Who? I don't know, Kalia admitted. But they called me the key. Before Riven could respond, a bone-chilling howl cut through the clearing. The rogues froze, their glowing eyes turning toward the source of the sound. From the shadows emerged a massive wolf, larger than any they'd faced before. Its fur was pure black, its eyes blazing with an unnatural red light. Riven tensed, his body coiled like a spring. That's him, he said, his voice low and dangerous. The one who's been controlling the rogues. Kalia's heart pounded as she stared at the creature. It exuded raw power, its presence suffocating. But as terrifying as it was, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching her, its gaze filled with a dark, twisted curiosity. The black wolf's gaze locked onto Kalia, and for a moment, the entire clearing seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a deafening roar, it charged. Riven pushed Kalia behind him, his body shifting into his wolf form mid-motion. But Kalia knew, with a sinking feeling in her chest, that this was no ordinary rogue. And if the visions were true, the key to defeating it wasn't Riven, it was her. The black wolf's charge felt like a force of nature, unstoppable and unrelenting. The ground quaked beneath its massive paws, its glowing red eyes locked onto Kalia with an intensity that made her blood run cold. "Stay back!" Riven roared, his wolf form surging forward to intercept the beast. Their collision sent a shockwave through the clearing, knocking some wolves off their feet. Kalia scrambled back, her mind racing. The tree's symbols pulsed behind her, their glow flickering erratically as if responding to the chaos around them. She could feel the pull again, stronger this time, like the tree was calling her, begging her to act. But how? Her heart pounded as she watched Riven and the black wolf clash. The beast was massive, easily dwarfing Riven's wolf form, and its movements were unerringly calculated. It fought with a precision that spoke of intelligence, not primal instinct. Every blow it landed seemed aimed to incapacitate rather than kill, as though it had a purpose beyond the fight. "It's toying with him," Kalia realized, dread pooling in her stomach. The pack warriors circled the battle, their growls low and threatening, but none dared intervene. They could sense the black wolf's power, its dominance suffocating. This wasn't a fight they could win by numbers alone. "Kalia!" Vera's voice cut through the noise, snapping her out of her daze. The healer was rushing toward her, her face pale but determined. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," Kalia said breathlessly, though her trembling hands betrayed her. "What is that thing?" Vera's gaze flicked to the fight, her jaw tightening. "It's no ordinary wolf, that's for sure. Whatever magic created that. It's not natural." Kalia swallowed hard. "The tree. It's connected to all of this. I saw something, someone, tied to the curse. They called me the key." "The key." Vera's brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "I don't know," Kalia admitted, her voice shaking. "But the tree, it feels alive, like it's trying to tell me something. I think I'm supposed to do something." Before Vera could respond, a bone-crunching sound drew their attention back to the fight. Riven let out a pained growl as the black wolf slammed him into the ground, its massive jaws snapping inches from his throat. "No!" Kalia cried, instinct propelling her forward. "Kalia, wait!" Vera shouted, but it was too late. Kalia was already running toward the tree. The symbols on the tree pulsed erratically as Kalia approached, their light growing brighter with each step. She could feel the energy coursing through her veins, a current of power that wasn't hers but somehow felt intrinsic to her being. Her hand reached out, hesitating only for a moment before pressing against the bark. The world shifted. She was no longer in the clearing. Instead, she stood in a dark, endless void. The tree loomed before her, its branches stretching into infinity. The carvings glowed with a soft, golden light, their intricate patterns shifting as though alive. "Kalia," a voice echoed, deep and resonant. It wasn't the woman from before, but something older, ancient. "Who are you?" Kalia demanded, turning in circles to find the source of the voice. "I am the essence of what was once pure," the voice replied. "The guardian of balance, corrupted by those who sought to wield my power for their own gain." "The Black Wolf?" Kalia asked, her heart racing. Is it connected to you? Yes, the voice said, a note of sorrow weaving through its tone. It was once a protector, a vessel of my power. But greed and ambition twisted it into what you now face. It seeks to reclaim what it believes was stolen. And what does that have to do with me? Kalia pressed, desperation creeping into her voice. You are the key to restoring balance, the voice said simply. Your bond with the Alpha is more than fate. It is a conduit, a bridge between what was and what can be. But to wield this power, you must make a choice. A choice. Kalia repeated, her throat tightening. What kind of choice? The voice didn't answer. Instead, the void dissolved around her, and she was thrust back into the clearing. Riven was struggling against the black wolf, his movements slower, his strength waning. Blood matted his fur, and his growls were weaker, more desperate. The pack watched in horrified silence, unsure of how to help without making things worse. Kalia. Riven's voice, raw and broken, reached her ears as she stumbled toward the fight. Her gaze locked onto the black wolf, its eyes blazing as it pinned Riven to the ground. In that moment, she knew what she had to do. The tree's energy surged through her, guiding her steps. She placed herself between the wolf and Riven, her arms outstretched in defiance. The black wolf hesitated, its gaze narrowing as it studied her. The pack held their breath, the tension so thick it was suffocating. You don't have to do this, Kalia said, her voice steady despite the fear twisting her insides. Whatever you're fighting for, whatever you've lost, it doesn't have to end like this. The wolf growled low, its massive body coiling like a spring. For a moment, Kalia thought it might lunge, but then its eyes shifted. The red light flickered, replaced by something softer, almost mournful. Kalia, move. Riven growled from behind her, but she didn't budge. The black wolf tilted its head, a strange intelligence shining in its eyes. And then, to everyone's shock, it spoke. You are stronger than I thought, it rumbled, its voice deep and guttural. But strength alone will not save you. Before Kalia could respond, the wolf lunged, not at her, but at the tree. The black wolf's massive claws tore into the bark of the tree, its glowing symbols shattering like glass. A surge of energy exploded from the tree, knocking everyone off their feet. As Kalia hit the ground, her vision blurred, and a single thought echoed in her mind. The balance was breaking. The explosion of energy from the tree was like a tidal wave, rippling outward with a force that flattened the surrounding forest. Kalia's ears rang, and her vision was blurred, her body trembling as she struggled to push herself up from the ground. Around her, the pack lay scattered, stunned and disoriented. Riven was beside her, his wolf form battered and bloodied. He let out a weak growl, trying to rise but collapsing back with a pained grunt. Kalia reached out, her fingers brushing his fur. Riven, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the ringing in her ears. The air was heavy with static, charged with an unnatural energy that prickled at her skin. Her gaze shifted to the tree, or what was left of it. The once majestic trunk was split down the middle, its glowing symbols dimmed and cracked like broken glass. The black wolf stood before it, its body trembling as wisps of dark energy coiled around it like living shadows. You've made a grave mistake, the wolf growled, its voice warped and layered with an eerie resonance. It turned its crimson gaze toward Kalia, and she felt the weight of its anger like a physical blow. The balance is shattered, and the world will pay the price. What do you mean? Kalia demanded, forcing herself to her feet. Her legs wobbled beneath her, but she stood firm, her heart pounding in her chest. What balance? The wolf's lips curled back in a snarl, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. You are the key, but you do not understand the locks you've broken. This power was never meant for you. Kalia's mind raced. The Guardian's voice echoed in her memory. Your bond with the Alpha is a conduit, a bridge between what was and what can be. She looked at Riven, his labored breaths filling the silence between them. It wasn't supposed to end like this, she said, her voice trembling. There has to be a way to fix it. The Black Wolf's laugh was a low, guttural sound that sent shivers down her spine. Fix it. You can't fix what's already broken. The world will crumble under the weight of your failure. Before Kalia could respond, the wolf turned its attention back to the shattered tree. Its massive paws clawed at the ground, drawing intricate patterns in the dirt. The dark energy surrounding it grew denser, pulsing with a rhythm that made the ground quake. What are you doing? Kalia shouted, panic rising in her chest. Restoring what was taken, the wolf replied, its voice cold and unyielding. If the balance cannot be maintained, it will be replaced. Kalia's heart sank. Whatever the wolf was doing, it felt wrong, dangerous. She glanced at Riven, who was slowly regaining his strength. His amber eyes locked onto hers, and she saw the same determination mirrored in his gaze. We have to stop it, Riven growled, his voice hoarse but resolute. How? Kalia asked, her mind racing. It's too powerful. You're the key, Riven said, shifting to his human form despite his injuries. He staggered to his feet, his hand gripping her shoulder for support. The tree chose you. There has to be something you can do. Kalia looked back at the tree, its once golden glow now a sickly, flickering light. She didn't know what she was supposed to do, but the pull she'd felt earlier was still there, stronger now, as if the tree was pleading with her. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her heart hammering in her chest. The Black Wolf's growl deepened, its body tensing as if ready to strike. Stay back, it roared, but Kalia didn't stop. As she approached the tree, the symbols on its bark flickered, responding to her presence. Her hand hovered over the jagged split, the energy radiating from it both inviting and terrifying. She glanced over her shoulder at Riven, who nodded, his jaw set with determination. I'm with you, he said, his voice steady. Kalia turned back to the tree and pressed a palm against the broken bark. A jolt of energy shot through her, and the world around her dissolved into a swirling void of light and shadow. She was no longer in the clearing. Instead, she stood in a vast expanse of darkness, illuminated only by the faint golden glow of the tree's symbols. The air was thick with tension, and the ground beneath her feet felt insubstantial, as though she were walking on the surface of a dream. Why have you come? The Guardian's voice echoed, its tone heavy with disapproval. To fix this, Kalia said, her voice wavering. To restore the balance. The Guardian appeared before her, a towering figure of light and shadow. Its form was indistinct, constantly shifting, but its presence was overwhelming. You think you can undo what has been done? It asked, its voice laced with both anger and sorrow. The balance was already fragile. Your actions have unleashed forces beyond your comprehension. Then tell me what to do. Kalia pleaded, her hands clenched at her sides. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be the key. But if I can fix it, I will. Just tell me how. The Guardian was silent for a long moment, its form flickering like a dying flame. When it finally spoke, its voice was softer, almost mournful. To restore the balance, you must make a sacrifice. Kalia's heart sank. What kind of sacrifice? One that only you can make, the Guardian said cryptically. The bond between you and the Alpha is both your strength and your burden. To save the world, you must sever it. The words hit Kalia like a physical blow. Sever the bond? The bond that had caused so much pain and confusion, but also held the promise of something greater? Her mind raced, torn between duty and desire. "Is there no other way?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There is always a choice," the guardians said. "But every choice comes with a price. The question is, what are you willing to pay?" Kalia's vision blurred as the guardian's words echoed in her mind. Behind her, she could feel the black wolf's presence growing stronger, its dark energy pulsating like a heartbeat. The balance hung by a thread, and the weight of the decision pressed down on her like a mountain. As the void began to dissolve, opened her eyes, the guardian's final words followed her, came back into sharp focus. Kalia, the air buzzed, the fate with an unnatural energy in your hands, and the black wolf stood as an ominous sentinel near the shattered tree. Its crimson eyes glowed like embers, flickering between malevolence and anguish. Riven's strained form leaned against a boulder, his amber eyes locked on her as if willing her to find strength. The guardian's words rang in Kalia's ears. "You must make a sacrifice." "What did you see?" Riven asked, his voice hoarse. His injuries had taken a toll, but his gaze was steady, his alpha resolve cutting through the haze of exhaustion. Kalia didn't answer immediately. Her fingers brushed the jagged edges of the tree's bark as if trying to pull answers from its fractured surface. Her thoughts churned like a storm. The bond was the tether, the bridge between chaos and salvation. Severing it would restore the balance, but it would come at a cost. "It told me the bond needs to be broken," Kalia finally whispered, her voice trembling. "It's the only way." "No," Riven growled, shaking his head. He tried to stand fully, but his legs gave out, and he sank back against the boulder. "That bond is the reason I came back. The reason I haven't lost myself entirely." "Riven." Kalia's throat tightened. She turned to him, her gaze pleading. "It's not about us anymore. The entire pack, maybe even more, is at risk. If this imbalance grows, it could destroy everything." His jaw clenched, and his eyes flared with defiance. "We'll find another way. We'll fight this together." Before Kalia could respond, the black wolf let out a low, guttural snarl. It stepped closer, its movements deliberate and predatory. "You still don't understand," it growled, its voice a sinister blend of beast and shadow. "The bond is poison. It has tethered the chaos to this world, allowed it to fester and grow." Kalia turned to face the black wolf, her fists clenched at her sides. "And breaking it will stop this?" "It will restore the balance," the wolf replied. "But it will not be painless. Bonds of this nature cannot be undone without consequence." The weight of the wolf's words settled over Kalia like a shroud. She glanced back at Riven, whose gaze was locked on hers. There was something raw and vulnerable in his expression, a flicker of fear beneath his stoic exterior. "What happens if we don't break it?" Riven demanded, his voice laced with desperation. "The chaos will consume you both," the wolf said, its tone cold. "And when it does, it will spread like wildfire, destroying everything in its path." Kalia's mind raced as she weighed her options. Her heart ached at the thought of severing the bond, of losing the connection that had tied her to Riven in ways she hadn't even begun to understand. But the alternative, the destruction, the pain it would bring to the pack and beyond, it was unthinkable. She stepped closer to Riven, her hands trembling as she reached for his. "If there was any other way, I'd take it," she said, her voice breaking. "But I can't let this destroy everything." Riven gripped her hands tightly, his expression fierce. "You don't have to do this alone, Kalia. If the bond is our strength, we can use it to fight back." "It's not our strength anymore," Kalia said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's a curse. And if I don't end it, we'll lose everything." The black wolf let out a low, impatient growl. "Enough of this. Decide, or I will decide for you. Kolia turned to the shattered tree, her resolve hardening. The golden glow of the symbols pulsed faintly, as if mirroring the rhythm of her heartbeat. She pressed her hand against the bark, her mind focused on the bond that connected her to Riven. It was a lifeline, a thread woven into the very fabric of her being. Severing it would be like tearing away a piece of herself. But she had no choice. "I'm sorry, Riven," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can't let this destroy you." As she channeled her energy into the tree, a searing pain shot through her chest. She gasped, her knees buckling beneath her. The bond resisted, clinging to her with a desperate intensity. Images flashed through her mind, Riven's eyes, his touch, the quiet moments they'd shared. Each memory felt like a knife twisting in her heart. Riven's voice cut through the haze of pain. "Stop, Kolia. You don't have to do this." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I do. For you. For all of us." The tree's glow intensified, its light blinding as the bond began to unravel. The black wolf howled, its form writhing as the dark energy surrounding it began to dissipate. The air crackled with power, and the ground trembled beneath them. And then, with a final burst of light, the tree went still. Kolia collapsed to the ground, her body trembling and her chest aching with an unbearable emptiness. She felt the bond snap, like a thread pulled too taut and then broken. The world around her seemed dimmer, as though a vital part of it had been stripped away. Riven was at her side in an instant, his hands on her shoulders as he tried to steady her. "Kolia, look at me," he said, his voice trembling. "Are you okay?" She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. There was a hollowness in her chest, an ache that went deeper than anything she'd ever felt. But beyond the pain, there was a sense of calm. The chaos was gone. The balance had been restored. I think it's over," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Before Riven could respond, a low rumble echoed through the clearing. The black wolf, now reduced to a shadowy figure, let out a sinister laugh. "You may have restored the balance," it said, its voice dripping with malice. "But you've unleashed something far greater. The true test has only just begun." As the shadow dissolved into the night, Kolia and Riven exchanged a look of dread. Whatever they had set in motion, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The black wolf's ominous warning echoed in Kolia's mind long after its shadowy form dissolved into the night. The clearing was eerily still, but it wasn't the calm she'd longed for. The air felt heavy, the promise of something darker looming just out of sight. Riven knelt beside her, his hands warm but trembling slightly as he held her shoulders. "What did it mean?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Kolia shook her head, her breathing shallow. "I don't know," she admitted. "But it's not over. It never is." Their bond was gone. She could feel the absence like a chasm where once there had been a bridge. The tether that had tied their fates together was no more, but the consequences of severing it were only beginning to unfold. "We need answers," Riven said, his amber eyes scanning the darkened forest. "And we're not going to find them standing here." Kolia hesitated, her body still weak from the ritual. But she nodded, summoning what strength she could muster. "The Elder's Journal," she said suddenly. "It might tell us more." The pack's library was silent, its rows of ancient bookshelves standing like sentinels in the dim light of the lanterns. Dust motes floated lazily through the air, disturbed only by the hurried footsteps of Kolia and Riven as they moved toward the restricted section. The Elder's Journal was hidden deep within a locked cabinet, a relic of the pack's past that few dared to touch. It had been written by the first Alpha, a chronicler of lore, secrets, and warnings passed down through generations. Riven broke the lock with ease, his strength tearing the cabinet's door from its hinges. Inside, amidst a collection of brittle tomes, was the journal. Its leather cover was cracked and weathered, and the faint scent of old parchment clung to it. Kalia reached for it, her fingers brushing against the cover. The moment she touched it, a jolt of energy shot through her, sharp and electrifying. "Careful," Riven warned, his hand hovering near hers. "Whatever's in there, it's meant to stay hidden." Kalia's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's exactly why we need it." They spread the journal out on the long wooden table in the center of the room, its yellowed pages filled with spidery handwriting and intricate symbols. Kalia ran her fingers over the ink, her heart pounding as she deciphered the text. "It talks about the chaos," she said, her voice hushed. "The balance isn't just about the bond. It's tied to the pack, to our territory. The chaos feeds on disruption, on fractures within the pack." Riven's jaw tightened. "And severing the bond created one of those fractures." Kalia nodded, her fingers trembling as she turned the page. "It says the chaos is a living force. It can be contained, but never destroyed. If it grows too strong," she trailed off, her voice faltering. Riven leaned closer, his presence steadying. "What happens?" She swallowed hard, her gaze locked on the page. "It consumes everything. Not just the pack, but the land itself. It spreads until there's nothing left but—" Her voice cracked. "Desolation." A tense silence filled the room as the weight of the revelations settled over them. The decision to sever the bond had been necessary, but the cost was becoming clearer with every word. Before they could process the implications, a faint rustling reached their ears. It came from the far corner of the library, where the shadows seemed to deepen unnaturally. Riven was on his feet in an instant, his body tense and ready to defend. "Who's there?" he called, his voice echoing through the quiet space. The shadows shifted, coalescing into a figure cloaked in darkness. Its form was indistinct, flickering between solidity and mist, but its eyes glowed a familiar crimson. "You've meddled with forces beyond your understanding," the figure said, its voice a guttural growl that sent chills down Kalia's spine. "The balance is fragile. You've cracked it." Kalia stepped forward, her fear overridden by a surge of defiance. "We did what we had to do. The bond was poisoning us. And now you'll pay the price," the figure hissed. "The chaos will not rest. It will seek a new vessel." Riven moved to stand beside Kalia, his presence a wall of protection. "What vessel? What do you mean?" The figure's crimson gaze locked onto Kalia, and a slow, sinister smile spread across its shadowed face. "The one who severed the bond. The one who dared to defy fate." Kalia's blood ran cold as the realization struck her. The chaos wasn't gone. It had merely shifted its focus to her. The figure vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Kalia sank into the chair, her mind racing with the implications. Riven placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out. Whatever it takes." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and fear. "If the chaos is tied to me now, I won't let it destroy the pack. I'll end this." Riven's expression hardened. "Not alone, you won't." Before Kalia could respond, the library's doors slammed open, and Vera burst inside, her face pale and her breathing ragged. "You need to come quickly," she said, her voice shaking. "The pack is changing. Something's happening, and it's not natural." Kalia and Riven exchanged a look of dread before following Vera into the night, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that the chaos wasn't done with them yet. The air was thick with tension as Kalia, Riven, and Vera stepped into the heart of the pack's territory. The once familiar village was unrecognizable, cloaked in an unnatural haze that clung to the ground like fog. Shadows twisted unnaturally, and the pack's howls carried a strange, discordant tone, half agony, half rage. Kalia's heart pounded as she took in the scene. Wolves in various stages of shifting writhed on the ground, their bodies trembling as if caught between forms. Others paced erratically, their golden eyes flickering with hints of crimson, the telltale mark of chaos taking hold. "What's happening to them?" Kalia asked, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. Vera's face was pale as she scanned the chaos. "The balance is gone," she murmured. "It's spreading through the pack like a sickness." Riven growled low in his throat, his eyes darting from one wolf to the next. "We need to contain this. If it spreads further." Kalia interrupted, her voice trembling. "It's already too late. The chaos isn't just spreading. It's consuming them." As they moved deeper into the village, they saw the effects of the chaos in horrifying detail. Wolves snapped at one another with wild ferocity, their movements jerky and unnatural. Buildings were marked with claw marks, the scent of fear and aggression thick in the air. A young wolf, a boy barely old enough to shift, staggered toward them, his eyes wide with terror. "Help," he pleaded, his voice breaking. "It hurts." Vera moved to him immediately, her hands glowing faintly as she attempted to ease his pain. But the boy's body convulsed, his form flickering between human and wolf before he collapsed, unconscious. Kalia knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch his forehead. His skin was hot, his breaths shallow. "It's the chaos," she whispered. "It's breaking them apart." Riven's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. "We don't have time to wait for answers. We need to act." Kalia looked up at him, her eyes filled with determination. "I think I know what we need to do." The Elder's journal burned in her mind, its cryptic warnings now painfully clear. The chaos wasn't just a force, it was a presence, a living entity seeking a host to sustain it. And without the bond between Kalia and Riven to anchor it, the chaos had fractured, seeping into every corner of the pack. "We have to bring the balance back," Kalia said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. The bond was part of the pack's foundation. Without it, the chaos will keep growing. Riven's eyes darkened. "You're saying we need to restore the bond?" Kalia nodded. "It's the only way to stabilize the pack. But we can't do it the same way. The old bond, it was flawed. It broke us instead of strengthening us." Vera frowned. "How do you plan to create a new bond?" "The ritual can't be repeated, not after what happened." Kalia hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing on her. "There's another way," she said finally. "But it's dangerous." In the center of the village stood an ancient stone circle, a relic of the pack's earliest days. It was said to be a place of power, where the first Alpha had forged the bond that tied the pack to the land. Kalia led Riven and Vera to the circle, the air growing colder with every step. The stones loomed tall and imposing, their surfaces etched with runes that seemed to pulse faintly in the moonlight. Kalia stepped into the circle, her gaze fixed on the largest stone at its center. "This is where it began," she said, her voice reverent. "The first Alpha used this place to forge the bond that united the pack. If we're going to fix this, we have to start here." Riven looked uneasy, his instincts warning him of the danger. "What exactly are you planning?" Kalia turned to face him, her expression resolute. "We're going to draw the chaos here. If we can contain it within the circle, we might be able to force it to stabilize." Vera's eyes widened. "That's a gamble, Kalia." If it doesn't work. It has to work, Kalia said firmly. We don't have another choice. They began the ritual as the chaos continued to spread, the pack's howls growing more frenzied. Kalia stood at the center of the circle, her hands raised as she chanted the words from the Elder's journal. The air around her seemed to hum with energy, the runes on the stones glowing brighter with each syllable. Riven stood at the edge of the circle, his body tense as he watched her. If this goes wrong. It won't, Kalia said, cutting him off. You need to trust me. The ground beneath them trembled as the ritual reached its peak. A low, guttural growl echoed through the clearing, and the shadows around the circle began to writhe and twist. The chaos was coming, drawn to the power of the stones. Kalia's voice grew louder, her words taking on a rhythmic cadence. The air crackled with energy, and the temperature plummeted. The chaos took shape before them, a swirling mass of darkness with crimson eyes that burned like fire. Riven moved to Kalia's side, his body shielding her from the chaos's oppressive presence. What now? He asked, his voice low. Kalia met his gaze, her expression calm despite the storm raging around them. We finish this. Together. The chaos roared, its voice a deafening cacophony that shook the ground. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, testing the boundaries of the circle. Kalia and Riven clasped hands, their combined strength the only thing keeping the chaos contained. But as the shadows pressed closer, Kalia felt a cold dread seep into her veins. The chaos wasn't just testing the circle, it was testing her. And the question burned in her mind. Was she strong enough to face it? The chaos roared like a beast caged, its tendrils lashing at the stones, pushing harder against the ancient boundaries. The runes flared and flickered, holding for now but trembling under the weight of the entity's growing strength. Kalia's chant faltered as the oppressive energy seeped into her mind, filling it with whispers that clawed at her sanity. Stay with me. Riven barked, his voice cutting through the haze of terror clouding her thoughts. His hand gripped hers, anchoring her as the ground beneath their feet quaked. I'm trying, Kalia gasped, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. It's too strong. Stronger than I thought. Riven's jaw tightened, his crimson-tinged eyes darting to the chaos. It's feeding on us, he muttered. Our fear. Our bond. It's using everything. Kalia's breath hitched as realization struck. The chaos wasn't just attacking, it was learning, adapting. Each strike against the barrier became more calculated, more deliberate. This wasn't just a mindless force. It was sentient, and it wanted one thing: freedom. The runes dimmed, their glow faltering like a flame struggling against the wind. Vera, standing just outside the circle, screamed over the noise. The stones are breaking. If it gets out. We can't let that happen. Kalia yelled back, desperation coloring her tone. But even as she spoke, the chaos surged again, a tidal wave of darkness that slammed into the circle with unrelenting force. The barrier buckled, cracks spiderwebbing through the stones. The runes pulsed weakly, their light dimming as if the ancient magic was losing its will to fight. No! Kalia screamed, pouring every ounce of strength she had into the ritual. Her voice rose, louder, more fervent, as if sheer determination could hold the chaos at bay. It wasn't enough. The largest stone exploded in a blinding burst of light and shards, sending Kalia and Riven sprawling to the ground. The air went still for a heartbeat, the calm before the storm. And then, the chaos surged forward, unrestrained, consuming the circle in an instant. Kalia scrambled to her feet, her heart racing as the shadows loomed over her. Tendrils of darkness reached for her, brushing her skin like icy fingers. A voice whispered in her mind, low, guttural, and filled with malice. You are mine now. Kalia. Riven's roar snapped her out of the trance. He lunged, pulling her out of the chaos's reach, but not before a tendril wrapped around his arm. He snarled in pain, his body trembling as the shadows burrowed into his skin. No. Let him go. Kalia cried, her fists pounding against the darkness. But it was futile. The chaos tightened its grip, dragging Riven closer to its core. Kalia, his voice was strained, his eyes locking onto hers. You have to stop this. No matter what it takes. Tears streamed down her face as the chaos pulled him away. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice, he growled. Save the pack. Save yourself. And then he was gone, swallowed by the chaos. Kalia fell to her knees, her screams lost in the void as the chaos dissipated, leaving only silence, and the chilling promise of its return. To be continued. Like, share and subscribe to show the author support and love.